The first crack of gunfire split the early morning silence, sending a flock of crows shrieking into the pink-hued sky. Mara Grayson's heart skipped a beat as she crouched behind the rough timber of her ranch house. Dustwood was quiet most mornings, but not today. The smell of gunpowder lingered in the air, a sharp contrast to the sweet scent of prairie flowers blooming along the riverbank. She gritted her teeth and pressed her fingers against the worn stock of her father's rifle. Her green eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the horizon. Beyond the rolling fields, past the dry creek bed and jagged cliffs, a lone figure appeared on horseback. Broad-shouldered and tall, his skin bronzed and glistening with sweat. Long black hair streaked with gray fell to his shoulders, adorned with feathers and beads. A single Apache knife glimmered in the morning sun at his belt, etched with intricate symbols. Mara's pulse raced. She had heard tales of Apache warriors in these lands, some vengeful, some noble, but this man exuded a presence that was more than mere legend. His eyes, dark and penetrating, scanned her property as if weighing her soul. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice calm but firm. The rider lifted a hand, not in greeting, but in measured pause. "I am Takoda," he said, his deep voice resonant and controlled. "And I am here because a man in your town has wronged my people. His name is Jed Harlow." Mara frowned. Jed Harlow was a neighboring rancher, a man notorious in Dustwood for his greed and cruelty. She had crossed paths with him only a few times, each encounter leaving a bitter taste of arrogance. "I have nothing to do with him," she replied cautiously, gripping the rifle tighter. Takoda's gaze didn't waver. "Perhaps not directly," he said, "but you have sheltered him, knowingly or not. Now you stand in the path of the consequences." Before Mara could respond, a distant rumble reached her ears. At first, it sounded like thunder rolling across the cliffs, but then she realized it was the pounding of hooves, hundreds of them. Dust clouds spiraled on the horizon, and more riders appeared over the crest of a distant hill. Mara's breath caught in her throat. "Step aside, woman," Takoda said, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his knife. "Your walls may shield you for a moment, but they cannot hold an army." Mara glanced at her cabin, where her younger brother Jonah peeked nervously from behind the wooden doorframe. "We won't leave our home," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Takoda's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then you will see what defiance costs." The riders dismounted as the sun rose higher, their movements precise and disciplined. Mara's heart hammered as she counted too many to fight, too organized to fear recklessly. Her mind raced, remembering her father's teachings about handling crises, about staying calm when others expected panic. This was no ordinary threat. This was a test of courage and judgment, of moral fortitude. Mara's eyes darted to Jed Harlow's barn, where she saw the man swagger out, a revolver loosely held in his hand, smirking at the approaching danger. "What's all this, Grayson?" he shouted, sneering at Mara. "Some Apache show? You brought the circus to your front yard?" "You've gone too far this time, Jed," Mara said, her voice ice cold. "The man outside Takoda has every right to be angry. You've wronged his people. You'll answer for it, whether you like it or not." Jed laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made Mara's teeth clench. "Answer? He's alone out there. And look at you, standing in your little cabin like a scared girl. What are you going to do, pray him away?" Mara swallowed hard. She could hear the faint neighs and snorts of Takoda's riders, waiting, disciplined, ready. She knew there would be no miracles today. She had to act, but not recklessly. The first confrontation had begun, and it was as much a test of mind as of muscle. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying the metallic scent of the distant rifles and the earthy aroma of the prairie. Mara pressed her cheek against the rough wood of her porch, eyes narrowing. She noticed the way Takoda's shoulders moved calm, controlled, yet coiled like a spring ready to strike. She could see the lines of his jaw, the firm set of his mouth, and the intensity of his gaze. "Step aside, Grayson," Takoda repeated, more softly now, yet with an authority that made her shiver. "I do not wish to harm you, but I will protect what is mine." "I don't even know what's yours," Mara said. "Yet's wrongs aren't mine, yet you threaten me." "You shelter him," Takoda said evenly, "and by sheltering, you enable. By enabling, you participate. You will not understand the full weight of consequence until you are willing to face it." Mara's fingers tightened on the rifle. She felt a surge of both fear and resolve. She would not cower. This land was hers, her family's, inherited through generations of hard work and courage, and she would defend it. The riders edged closer, forming a half circle around the cabin. Mara noticed their movements deliberate, disciplined, silent. No bloodlust, no chaos, only precision. She realized these were warriors who understood the balance between restraint and power. Inside the cabin, Jonah clutched a broom, his hand shaking. "Mara, what do we do?" he whispered. "We hold them off for now," Mara said, her voice steady, though her mind raced for strategy. "We wait, observe, and when the time comes, we act." The sun climbed higher, glinting off the metal of Takoda's knife and catching in the feathers of his hair. Mara felt her pulse sync with the rhythm of the distant hooves. This was no ordinary day. This was the day her courage would be tested. And deep down, Mara knew that the outcome of this confrontation could define the future of Dustwood itself. Suddenly, a hawk cried overhead, circling in the rising wind. Mara watched as it swooped down, talons extended, and instinctively felt a shiver of recognition. Predators did not attack without reason, just as Takoda and his warriors would not act without cause. Mara understood something fundamental. Respect, caution, and decisiveness were as much weapons as bullets. Jed Harlow had approached too far, his arrogance almost comical in the face of disciplined threat. Mara's eyes narrowed. "Jed," she said sharply, "you either confess your deeds or face consequences far beyond what you can imagine. Takoda is not like other men of Dustwood." The morning passed in tense silence. The wind whipped across the plains, carrying the scent of dust, pine, and gunpowder. Mara could hear her own heartbeat as she crouched behind the porch rail. And then, in a voice low but unmistakable, Takoda spoke to the cavalry behind him. Mara couldn't hear the words, but she felt the weight of their attention. Her mind flicked back to her father's teachings. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. She had never faced an army, never imagined a day like this, but she could not waver. Dustwood was hers to protect, and she would meet the challenge head-on. Hours stretched into the heat of noon. Mara's muscles ached from crouching, but she did not falter. Every movement outside, the shifting of a horse, the subtle rustle of a leather strap was noted, remembered, analyzed. She had never felt so alive, so aware of every sense, every instinct. Then, as the sun reached its zenith, Mara made a decision. She would not wait for chaos to dictate her actions. Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, and met Takoda's gaze. "I cannot undo what Jed has done," she said, voice steady, "but I can help make it right. Let me speak with him, please." For a moment, silence stretched across the prairie, broken only by the faint snort of horses. Then Takoda inclined his head slightly. "You will speak with him," he said, measured, deliberate, "and he will confess. Only then will your walls remain safe." Mara's pulse quickened. She knew the confrontation with Jed Harlow would be dangerous, but she also sensed that truth could wield more power than bullets. And as she moved toward the barn, the wind carrying the scent of dust and wildflowers, She realized that this day, the day the wronged Apache arrived on her land, would change everything. Mara Grayson had never known fear like this before, but she also had never felt the clarity of purpose that surged through her veins now. And somewhere, in the disciplined silence of the warriors beyond the tree line, she sensed that Takoda understood something about her too, a determination that could not be broken, a courage that might yet earn his respect. The first part of the reckoning had begun. The sun climbed higher, baking the prairie in a harsh golden light. Dustwood seemed suspended in a slow, anxious heartbeat. Mara Grayson crouched behind the barricaded cabin door, listening to the rhythmic stamping of hooves from Takoda's riders encircling her property. Outside, the warriors had dismounted, forming a silent ring around her cabin, their movements deliberate and disciplined. Not a word, not a horse neigh, disturbed the tense calm. Jonah Grayson, her younger brother, pressed his face against the rough planks covering the windows. His hands shook as he held a broom like a weapon. "Mara, do you think they'll attack?" he whispered. Mara inhaled slowly, trying to steady her own racing pulse. She could see Takoda moving at the edge of the tree line, his presence like a living shadow, calm, controlled, and yet every inch of him coiled with lethal energy. "I don't think they want to attack," she said, her voice low but firm. "They're testing us, waiting to see what we do." Jonah's eyes widened. "Testing? But they have guns, Mara, and Jed. He's insane." Mara's hand tightened around the rifle inherited from her father. She had faced cattle rustlers, wild storms, and a harsh frontier life, but nothing had prepared her for this, 100 warriors encircling her home, led by a man whose reputation alone sent tremors of fear through Dustwood. "We stay calm, Jonah," she said. "We observe, we survive, and we act when necessary." Takoda's voice rang out suddenly, calm but commanding, carrying across the dusty clearing. "Mara Grayson, your walls are strong, but your spirit must be stronger. You harbor a man who has betrayed my people. Today you will witness justice, and you may yet choose the path of honor." Mara stepped out of her hiding spot, her rifle lowered but ready. She had made her decision. She would speak with Jed Harlow. She had to confront him directly. The heat of the midday sun reflected off the corrugated tin roof of the barn where Jed sat, his revolver lying lazily across his knees. His smirk was as arrogant as ever. "Jed," Mara called, her voice steady, carrying across the yard. "Takoda is outside. He knows what you've done. You need to tell the truth now. Confess your deeds or face him. And trust me, you won't like the consequences if you lie." Jed barked a harsh laugh. "Oh, Mara, you're brave, I'll give you that. Brave enough to talk to a man who could gut you like a calf in the blink of an eye?" Mara ignored the jab. "This isn't about courage, Jed. It's about what's right. You've stolen from the Apache, broken treaties, humiliated their elders, and now you've put me and my brother in the middle. You either speak the truth or we all pay the price." Yet's expression darkened. He shifted uneasily, glancing toward the tree line where Takoda and his warriors waited, the tips of their knives glinting in the sun. Mara noted that Jed had never looked afraid in her presence before, but now he fidgeted, the first signs of doubt flickering in his eyes. Mara walked closer, careful to keep her hands visible. "Jed, I'm giving you one chance to be honest. Not for me, but for yourself. Takoda's people follow a code, a way of justice that doesn't tolerate lies. Confess now, or you'll see what honor truly demands." Yet's jaw tightened, and he stood slowly, his revolver raised reflexively. "And what will he do? Shoot me?" Mara shook her head. "No, Takoda doesn't kill without reason. He punishes deceit. He gives judgment according to truth." The tension in the air was palpable. Dust danced in the sunlight, and the faint, Rhythmic drumming of hooves echoed like a heartbeat in Mara's ears. Takoda moved closer, his long black hair tied back with feathers and beads, his muscles taut beneath his simple shirt. Mara felt the weight of his presence, commanding, disciplined, and utterly unyielding. "You've been warned," Takoda said quietly but firmly. "Now speak, Jed Harlow." Jed hesitated. Sweat beaded at his brow. The arrogance that had defined him all these years faltered as he faced the inevitability of Takoda's judgment. Mara watched closely, her green eyes sharp as the truth began to unfold. Jed spoke reluctantly at first, stumbling over his words. I took the land. I broke agreements. I mocked the elders. But it was just business." "Business?" Mara repeated incredulously. "This is theft, Jed. Theft and betrayal. Your business has cost lives, and now it threatens mine." Takoda's gaze didn't waver. "You will continue," he said evenly, "and you will tell everything." Yet's voice rose, defensive now, as he recounted every act of deceit. He admitted to cheating the Apache on grazing rights, breaking trade agreements, and attempting to seize lands sacred to the elders. Each confession came with a growing realization of the gravity of his misdeeds. Mara's hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the intensity of the moment. Jonah peeked from behind a plank, astonished. "Mara, he's actually saying it. He's confessing." "Yes," Mara whispered, "but it's only the beginning. Takoda's warriors are watching. Every word matters." The day wore on, the sun blazing high and casting sharp shadows across the dusty clearing. Yet's confessions became more detailed, each revelation peeling away the layers of his arrogance. Takoda's expression remained calm, unreadable, but his eyes betrayed a simmering intensity. He was a man who carried the weight of his people's history, their suffering and their honor in every deliberate movement. Finally, Jed fell silent, shoulders slumping. Mara stepped closer. "You see, Jed? The truth doesn't need bullets to be powerful. Takoda doesn't need to fight to enforce justice. He simply requires honesty." Yet's lips trembled. "And what now?" Takoda's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his knife. "Now you face judgment," he said. "Not as a punishment born of anger, but as a consequence of your choices. You betrayed our people, and today you will understand the weight of that betrayal." Mara felt a strange relief wash over her. The immediate danger had not ended, but Yet's honesty had prevented bloodshed for now. She understood that courage and moral clarity were sometimes stronger than weapons. She looked at Takoda, his presence commanding yet fair, and realized that he was not only a warrior but a man of principle, someone who measured every action with care. Hours passed with the cabin under the silent watch of Takoda's warriors. Mara and Jonah used the time to repair fences, secure the livestock, and fortify the cabin. Every nail hammered and plank replaced was a reminder that survival required both courage and preparation. By late afternoon, the first signs of fatigue showed on Yet's face. He sat slumped against the barn wall, stripped of his bravado, confronted with the enormity of his actions. Mara noticed that Takoda's discipline had influenced the entire scene. There was no chaos, no violence, only the quiet assertion of justice through principle and presence. Mara realized she had learned something essential. Strength was not always physical. It was moral, strategic, and grounded in respect for life. Takoda's people embodied that principle, and she felt a profound respect for him. Finally, Takoda spoke to Mara, his voice carrying a rare softness. "You have courage, Mara Grayson. And courage in the face of fear earns respect, even from those who might otherwise see you as an enemy." Mara's chest tightened. "I only did what I had to do," she said, trying to steady her voice. "To protect my brother. My home." Takoda nodded. "And in doing so, You have prevented needless bloodshed. Remember this lesson, for it is rare and precious. Honesty and courage can turn even the gravest danger into an opportunity for peace. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the prairie, Mara looked at Jed Harlow and the encircling warriors. The tension had eased slightly, but the lesson remained vivid. Dustwood was not just a place of survival, it was a place where courage, truth, and honor intersected, often in violent and unexpected ways. Mara and Jonah returned to the cabin porch, surveying the horizon. Takoda remained near the tree line, watching silently, his presence a constant reminder of the day's events. Mara realized that this encounter had changed her, her brother, and even Jed Harlow in ways that could not be undone. The choices made today, the confessions, and the silent judgment of Takoda's people would echo long after the dust settled. As darkness approached, Mara felt a cautious hope. The immediate danger had passed, and the warriors had not attacked. Jed Harlow had admitted his wrongs. And though the threat of violence had loomed like a dark cloud all day, the quiet power of truth and courage had prevailed for now. Mara Grayson had survived the siege, but she knew this was only the beginning. The lessons of courage, honor, and consequence were etched deeply into her mind. Tomorrow the reckoning would continue, and the choices she made could decide the fate of her home, her family, and the legacy of Dustwood itself. The sun rose slowly over Dustwood, casting a warm amber glow across the prairie, but there was no comfort in the beauty. Mara Grayson stood on the porch of her cabin, watching the distant line of trees where Takoda and his warriors had encamped the day before. The air was thick with anticipation, each breath carrying the dry, metallic scent of the valley. Today, Jed Harlow would face the consequences of his deceit, and Mara felt a mixture of dread and resolve. Jonah emerged from the cabin, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Mara, do you think he'll survive this?" he asked, nodding toward Yet's barn. His voice trembled, betraying both fear and fascination. Mara shook her head. "Survive? I don't know. But I do know that justice isn't about killing, it's about understanding the weight of one's actions. That's what Takoda is teaching us all." They moved quietly to the barn, where Jed Harlow sat slumped against a haystack, his face pale, jaw tight, and revolver discarded at his side. He hadn't slept much, Mara noticed. The stress of the previous day, compounded by the scrutiny of Takoda's warriors, had broken the facade of arrogance that had always defined him. "Jed," Mara said, her voice steady but not unkind, "today is the day you face the consequences. Not for revenge, but because the truth must be honored." Jed looked up, a flicker of fear crossing his eyes. "And what exactly will happen? Takoda? He's not like other men, is he?" Mara shook her head. "No, he's not. He doesn't act out of anger or greed. He acts out of principle. He believes in consequences, and today you will experience them." From the tree line, Takoda stepped forward. His long black hair glinted in the morning light, tribal beads and feathers catching the sun. The muscles of his arms flexed with quiet strength, and his eyes, dark and unwavering, fixed on Jed with an intensity that made the man flinch. Mara felt a chill run down her spine. There was no menace in Takoda's stance, only the calm assurance of inevitable justice. "Jed Harlow," Takoda said, voice low and resonant, "yesterday you confessed your wrongs. Today you will see the full weight of your choices. My people were humiliated because of your greed. Now you will understand the cost of betrayal." Jed swallowed hard. His bravado from the day before had evaporated entirely. I understand," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "No," Takoda corrected. "You think you understand, but you do not. You will walk a path through this valley, stripped of the wealth you amassed through deceit. Every step will remind you of the lives affected by your greed. And at the end, the elders will judge you. Mara's stomach tightened at the words. She had lived her life according to her father's sense of justice and hard work, but the scale of Takoda's judgment was something entirely different, ceremonial, deliberate, and measured. She had never seen anything like it in Dustwood, and she was both terrified and awed. Yet's legs trembled as he was guided to the clearing by Takoda's warriors. Mara and Jonah followed at a respectful distance, keeping themselves within sight but out of the immediate circle. The clearing was surrounded by tall, ancient oaks, their leaves whispering in the morning wind. It seemed sacred, a place where truth could not be ignored. Takoda spoke again, his voice carrying across the clearing. "You will walk the length of this valley, Jed Harlow. Every gold coin you acquired through deception will be stripped from you. Every insult, every betrayal, every lie will follow you as you walk. Only when you face the elders will you be free of this burden." Yet's face turned pale, beads of sweat forming on his brow. "And if I falter?" he whispered. "You will not falter," Takoda replied evenly. "You will face the consequences. And in that facing, you will find clarity." Mara watched closely as Jed began his slow, humiliating trek across the clearing. At first, he tried to walk with dignity, but the weight of shame, both moral and spiritual, quickly crushed him. Mara noted the way his shoulders slumped with each step, the way his eyes darted nervously toward Takoda and the warriors surrounding him. Jonah leaned against Mara's side, whispering, It's like he's carrying every bad choice he's ever made." Mara nodded. "He is, and he will continue to carry them until he acknowledges their impact. Takoda's justice is not about fear, it's about responsibility." As Jed walked, Mara observed Takoda's careful attention to detail. He was not a man who hurried, nor did he yell or threaten unnecessarily. His judgment was silent but absolute, a reminder that the power of principle could outweigh the power of a gun. Mara felt a growing respect for him. This was the type of strength that demanded loyalty, not fear. By midday, Jed had made it to the center of the clearing, exhausted and humiliated. His hands were scraped, his shirt torn in places from the thorned brush, and his face was pale and drawn. Mara felt a pang of pity. He had been cruel, greedy, and deceitful, but witnessing the human cost of his actions was necessary. Takoda gestured toward the elders waiting beneath the largest oak. Their presence was commanding, their faces lined with age and wisdom. They did not speak immediately. Instead, they observed Yet's struggle, their silence a weight that pressed down like the sun at its zenith. Mara could feel her own heartbeat accelerate. She had never been close to a ritual of judgment like this, and yet she sensed the fairness in every measured motion. This was not vengeance. It was accountability. Finally, the eldest spoke, his voice low and resonant. "Jed Harlow, the balance of life is disrupted by dishonesty and greed. You have admitted your wrongs, but acknowledgement alone is not enough. Today you must bear the weight of what you have done and make restitution where possible." Yet's knees buckled slightly. I will do whatever is asked," he murmured, voice shaking. The elders nodded, and Takoda stepped forward. "Your path is clear," he said. "Return what you have stolen. Acknowledge each betrayal. Only then will you be free to return to the lands of Dustwood with a clear conscience." Mara felt a strange mix of awe and relief. She had witnessed countless injustices in her life, but this deliberate, controlled, moral retribution was different. It was justice without bloodshed, discipline without cruelty, and it demanded introspection, not intimidation. Jed spent the afternoon working through Takoda's demands. He returned stolen livestock, documented agreements, and apologized to every family and individual affected by his greed. The process was grueling, and each act of restitution weighed heavily on him, forcing him to confront the consequences of years of arrogance and dishonesty. Mara and Jonah assisted where possible, ensuring Jed did not escape responsibility. They could see the shift in him, not just fear, but understanding. He was no longer the cocky, smug man who had taunted Mara in her own barn. He was humbled, aware that honor and honesty carried more weight than money or intimidation. As the sun began to set, painting the valley in a warm orange glow, the elders finally pronounced judgment complete. Jed Harlow knelt before them, weary but no longer defiant. Takoda's warriors formed a respectful circle around the clearing, silent witnesses to the transformation. Takoda approached Mara, his expression calm but intense. "You have witnessed the power of truth, Mara Grayson. Courage, honesty, and accountability are stronger than any weapon. Remember this lesson." Mara nodded, her chest tight with emotion. "I will, Takoda. I've never seen justice like this before. It changes the way I see everything." Jonah, standing beside her, added softly, "It's like the land itself demanded balance, Mara, and we watched it happen." Takoda inclined his head slightly. "Yes, balance is everything. Without it, life becomes chaos. You have survived this day, and in doing so, you have learned a truth most men never understand." Mara felt a deep sense of gratitude and understanding. The events of the day had reshaped her perspective, her moral compass, and her respect for Takoda and his people. Justice, she realized, did not need to be violent, it needed to be fair, deliberate, and unavoidable. As darkness fell over Dustwood, Mara returned to the porch of her cabin, breathing in the cool evening air. The valley was quiet now, peaceful in a way that seemed almost surreal after the tension of the past 2 days. Jed Harlow had been humbled, Takoda's warriors had departed into the night to camp nearby, and Mara and Jonah were left to reflect on the lessons of courage, principle, and honor. Mara watched the stars emerge, bright and unyielding above the plains. She understood something fundamental. Life in Dustwood would never be the same, but she was stronger, wiser, and more prepared than ever before. And somewhere in the darkness, she felt the presence of Takoda, a reminder that justice, courage, and truth were eternal forces, capable of shaping even the most stubborn hearts. For the first time in days, Mara allowed herself to relax, knowing that tomorrow, the final chapter of reckoning would unfold, and the choices made today would echo far beyond the dusty hills and sun-baked plains of Dustwood. The first light of dawn stretched across Dustwood like molten gold, illuminating the rolling prairie in a soft, forgiving glow. Mara Grayson stepped onto the porch of her cabin, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin. The events of the past 3 days had left the valley changed. The air seemed sharper, cleaner, charged with the lessons of justice, courage, and consequence. Jonah emerged from the cabin behind her, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Mara," he said quietly, "do you think Jed will ever be the same?" Mara glanced at the distant barn where Jed Harlow had been humbled by Takoda's judgment. The man had endured the weight of truth and restitution, and Mara had watched him transformed from arrogant and greedy to humbled and painfully aware of his wrongs. "I don't know, Jonah," she said, her voice steady. "But I do know this: he's had no choice but to face the consequences of his actions. That lesson will stay with him, whether he likes it or not." Takoda emerged from the tree line, his long black hair tied back with feathers and beads, the morning sun glinting across the tribal jewelry he wore. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had seen countless injustices and survived them all. His dark eyes met Mara's, and she felt the same mixture of awe and respect that had gripped her since the first day. "You have done well," Takoda said, voice calm but imbued with authority. "You and your brother have endured fear, uncertainty, and the threat of violence, yet you did not falter. That courage is rare among your people." Mara nodded, feeling a sense of humility. "I only did what I had to do," she said, "to protect our home and to ensure the right thing was done. Takoda, your way of justice, it's unlike anything I've ever known. It's fair, and yet powerful in ways words cannot capture." Takoda inclined his head. "Justice is not measured by bloodshed alone. It is measured by accountability, by understanding, and by respect for life. Jed Harlow has learned this lesson, and you have witnessed it." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wild sage and dust across the valley. Mara's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the last of Takoda's warriors lingered, mounted silently, ready to depart when called. The quiet discipline of their presence contrasted sharply with the chaos and lawlessness she had known in Dustwood all her life. She felt the weight of their teachings lessons in restraint, honor, and moral clarity settling deep in her bones. Jed Harlow appeared from behind the barn, moving slowly and deliberately. He avoided Mara's gaze at first, as though ashamed even to look at her. The arrogance and defiance that had defined him were gone, replaced by the careful, wary movements of a man who had seen the consequences of his actions reflected in a mirror he could not ignore. "Mara." "Jonah," Jed said finally, his voice hoarse, I want to thank you. Not for me, but for making me face the truth." Mara's eyes narrowed slightly, suspicion and caution still lingering. "Jed, the truth you face doesn't excuse your actions. But it is a start. You have been held accountable. Now it's your choice to act with honor going forward." Jed nodded, a faint but genuine expression of understanding crossing his face. "I will, I swear it. I'll make amends where I can. And I'll never forget what I've learned." Takoda's eyes softened slightly as he observed Jed. Words matter little if not followed by action. You have the chance to prove yourself, Jed Harlow. Let this day be the beginning of your redemption. The morning passed quietly. Mara and Jonah repaired the damaged fences and ensured their cattle were fed. Jed worked alongside them at Takoda's direction, returning stolen livestock and documenting the restitution he owed. The physical labor, coupled with the weight of moral responsibility, seemed to humble him further. Mara could see the change not just in his demeanor, but in his movements slower, deliberate, respectful. By midday, the sun stood high, casting stark shadows across the plains. Takoda addressed Mara privately, his voice low. "You have earned the respect of my people. You faced fear without flinching and acted with honor. That is more than many men or women could claim in a lifetime." Mara exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. "It wasn't just me," she said. "Jonah was by my side the entire time. We survived together." Takoda's gaze softened as he looked at the boy. Courage can be taught by example, and it can be inherited. You both have shown that bravery is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Evening approached, painting the valley in shades of orange and purple. Mara felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. Dustwood was quiet now, the tension of the past days replaced by a fragile calm. The wind carried the faint sounds of hooves and rustling leaves as Takoda's warriors prepared to depart. Mara and Jonah watched silently, understanding that these men would vanish into the prairie as swiftly as they had appeared, like shadows of justice, leaving lessons behind but no trace of themselves. Before leaving, Takoda approached Mara once more. "Your people, Mara Grayson, will remember this day. It will be told in stories, not because of violence, but because of courage, truth, and honor. Protect your land and your family, and always act with integrity." Mara nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "I will, Takoda. And thank you for everything. You've shown me what true strength looks like." Takoda inclined his head, a rare smile touching his lips. Strength is measured not by what you can take, but by what you can protect. The warriors mounted their horses and disappeared over the distant hills, leaving Mara and Jonah alone in the quiet of the evening. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. Mara felt the weight of her responsibilities settle comfortably on her shoulders. She had faced fear, witnessed justice, and survived. More importantly, she had learned the lessons that would guide her in the years to come. As darkness fell, the first stars appeared in the night sky, twinkling above the valley. Mara stood on the porch, Jonah beside her, and reflected on the events that had changed Dustwood forever. Jed Harlow had been humbled, Takoda's warriors had delivered a lesson in honor without bloodshed, and the valley itself seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Mara finally spoke, her voice soft but resolute. Jonah, we've survived more than we could have imagined. But the valley, this land, it's more than just a place to live. It's a test, a teacher. And we've learned from it. Jonah nodded, his youthful face illuminated by the stars. I won't forget, Mara, and I won't forget what Takoda taught us either. Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. Nor should we. Courage, honesty, and honor, they're worth more than gold or cattle. They define who we are. In the days that followed, life in Dustwood returned to a semblance of normalcy. Mara tended to her ranch, cared for her cattle, and repaired the damage Jed Harlow's greed had wrought. Jonah assisted her, learning the ways of responsibility, respect, and diligence under his sister's watchful eye. Jed Harlow departed under Takoda's supervision, carrying with him the knowledge that deceit would never go unpunished. Mara never saw him again, but the lessons he embodied lingered, a cautionary tale about the consequences of greed and dishonor. Takoda returned only occasionally, offering guidance, wisdom, and reminders of the code he lived by. Each visit reinforced the principles Mara had learned: respect for life, integrity in action, and courage in the face of danger. Over time, she realized that these lessons were more valuable than any material gain she could achieve in Dustwood. One evening, Mara and Jonah stood on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The prairie was calm, the air fragrant with sage and wildflowers. Mara felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had protected her family, defended her home, and witnessed the power of justice and honor firsthand. Do you think we'll ever see Takoda again? Jonah asked, a hint of wonder in his voice. Mara smiled faintly. Perhaps. But even if we don't, his lessons will stay with us forever. And that is enough. As the stars sparkled overhead, Mara felt a quiet gratitude. Dustwood had tested her, challenged her, and ultimately transformed her. She had faced the bitter consequences of others' greed, stood firm in the face of danger, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. The wind whispered through the prairie grasses, a reminder of life's enduring rhythm. Mara Grayson, guardian of her home and witness to a remarkable justice, knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she and Jonah would face them with courage, honor, and unwavering resolve. And somewhere beyond the horizon, Takoda's presence lingered not as a shadow of threat, but as a symbol of integrity, courage, and the enduring power of truth. Dustwood was at peace once more, the lessons of the past forever etched into the hearts of those who had survived.